Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Mueller. I work with Jim Heaney closely on the project that we call Choosing Presence and try to do some of the outreach in our community, the weekly emails, those sorts of things. I live in Dayton, Ohio, so that's where I'm coming to you from this evening. And we also have with us Jim Taylor, who's an illumin weaver and wisdom elder, and of course, Jim Heaney, the author of Choosing Presence, who's made this possible. We may have some more people jump on to the call here at a little bit later time, but we're just going to go ahead and get started. Again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us and to learn more about the practice of presence. We want to acknowledge that this is Holy Thursday and that Easter is coming this Sunday. And so this year, we began reaching out at the beginning of the year with a weekly message called Practicing Presence, a Spiritual Intention. And so perhaps this is how you heard about our gathering this evening. And in our weekly message, what we do is we try to take some teaching or some content from Jim's book, Choosing Presence, and share that with everyone as a sort of teaching and an aid to their contemplative and prayer practice. And then we also offer a journaling prompt, something to go a little bit deeper with. And we also offer readers a little bit more information about some of the things, the videos, the Practicing Presence app, the resources that we have to help with the practice of presence. So I met Jim Taylor and Jim Heaney through Illumin. I know some of you know Illumin well. Illumin is an organization, it's a community of men helping other men on their spiritual journey. It was founded by Father Richard Rohr of the Center of Action for Action and Contemplation. You do not have to be a member of Illumin or even know anything about Illumin or Father Richard Rohr to be interested in choosing presence and the practice of presence. We're just happy to have you with us this evening, and we'll be welcoming your questions and feedback into the space. Next, I'd like to introduce our speakers to you this evening. First, we have Jim Heaney. If Jim Heaney will introduce himself and offer just a little bit more information about yourself, Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Heaney, and I don't know if I met any of us before. And I obviously wrote the book, Choosing Presence. And I look forward to tonight to hear your successes in practicing presence, as well as maybe your obstacles in choosing presence. And together, we could probably lead each other on this journey to God's spiritual being.
Thank you, Jim. And Jim is coming into from Southern California this evening is where he's at. And then next we have Jim Taylor. Jim is a reverend at the Mosaic Community Church in Seguin, Texas, and is also, as I mentioned, an illumin weaver and a wisdom elder. Jim, what else can you tell us a little bit about yourself here?
The reverend. Well, so what would I say? A lifelong participant and soul brother with you men in this whole endeavor to be what we originally already are. So shaking off those things that resist that has been the great work, I think. So I'm here. I'm in just outside San Antonio, Texas. I'm delighted to be with all of you. I'd ask all of you to turn on your cameras if you would be so dangerous. And I'm looking forward to this time together. Jim and I have been working on this presence thing since I think 2006 was the first time, Jim, you and I spoke about presence at a Jemez Springs, of all places. And I've been in love with Jim Heaney ever since. So I'll just start with that.
All right. Thank you, brothers. So what we usually like to do when we have a gathering around choosing presence is start with a practice of presence. And those of you that have downloaded the Practicing Presence app, you probably know about the morning practice. You can set it for 10, 15, 20 minutes or indefinite amount of time. We don't want to take that much time. We don't want to take 10 minutes out of our hour to do a full practice of presence this evening, but we hope that you are incorporating that into your daily practice. But what we have instead is we have a centering prayer from Father Richard Rohr, and it's actually something that I just stumbled across the other day. So The CIC publishes several podcasts, and one of them is called Everything Belongs. And they're in a new season of Everything Belongs. And as I was listening to this wonderful podcast with Father Richard, I noticed that he had about a 1 minute centering of prayer. So I'm going to offer that up here now as a way to bring ourselves into the space and kind of collect ourselves.
Let's try to be where we usually aren't in this boring now. Made less boring because of such lovely people. But let's enjoy them and allow them to enjoy us. And even dare to think we could enjoy God in this ordinary now. Take a deep breath. Take life in and give it back.
Amen.
Amen.
Father Richard Rohr offering us a centering prayer meditation. What he calls the boring now or the ordinary now is what we might also call presence. So we welcome you into this space here this evening. I thought we'd start this evening out a little bit where both Jim Heaney and Jim Taylor could talk a little bit more about their experiences. Jim Taylor said earlier they've been working together to share the practice of presence since around 2006 and having conversations about these and leading other men through workshops of choosing presence. And so let's start with Jim Heaney, the author of Choosing Presence. Jim, is there some more that you can say about choosing presence and the practice of presence here that might be helpful?
Well, if I was going to kind of give you an overview of what we're trying to teach, and to start with, obviously our foundation is Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. See, what I'm going to tell you is the Hebrew translation of the Psalm. For this reason, the original scripture was in Hebrew, and as Christians, it was in Greek. And the Hebrew translation, I believe, is quite beautiful and deep. And it goes like this. Be still means to drop everything, be present. And to know is not a mental knowing. It is an intimate knowing, as a man knows his wife. And then you will know that I am is God. And I think that translation is beautiful. And it just clearly tells us presence, stillness is the foundation of an intimate relationship with God. And it's through stillness and putting our trust in God that allows God to stop our fears and transform our pain. We have far too many of us spend too much of our time, too much of our day in an unconscious state, living through memory or anticipation, thinking or obsessing about something that did happen, or thinking or obsessing about something that may happen. It is a totally false reality. And through the practice of presence, that becomes very clear to us, because as we practice presence, as we do the practices that we're talking about, as we create, as we do the morning practice and do our hourly reminder, there is a definite contrast, a clear before and after, meaning we can see a clear picture of what am I experiencing when I'm in an unconscious state versus what am I experiencing when I'm in a conscious present state. The difference is unmistakable. And that is because as we practice presence, as we should consistently, we inner condition ourselves spiritually. And stillness frees us from what feeds our inner negativity. And guess the gift is this, is that you or me is not doing it. It's being done to us through stillness with intention. So please do not burden yourself thinking you're going to change yourself. You can't. I can't. God can. But we have to be in that space through stillness to allow him to do that. And also, it teaches us acceptance. When we don't accept what is, we are accepting what is not. And acceptance is so powerful because whatever we accept no longer has power over us. Whatever we don't accept is when we get into those dark spaces of unconsciousness. Thanks, brothers.
Thank you, Jim. Jim Taylor.
Wow, Jim Heaney, just so you know, like every sentence you said there was like the beginning of a chapter. And we could fall off a cliff into trying to unpack that reality. He has that sweet gift. I describe being in presence as, for me, when I'm saying this to myself, how do I, Jim, fall into a posture where I meet God? And I guess that I know that I'm meeting God, but I never really had to answer that part to myself. I always knew. The first time it ever happened to me, I was 8 years old. No one taught me. No one described it to me. I didn't even know anything about presence or choosing presence. I was just desperate, and God showed up. And I didn't think it was odd that he did, because I was truly desperate. And I met God in that moment, and I'm clear now. Jim says, because there's a clear before and after. And the before, I was consumed with my own concerns as a little 8-year-old. My mom had just taken her life. And in that meeting, I had a bigger concern. There was a clear before and after, and peace that is described as surpassing all understanding, that made no sense really in light of the circumstances, was something that I found and held on to desperately because I had to, But nonetheless, there was a clear before and after, Jim, and there was a clear posture that I fell into where I met God and I met myself, So it's got to be both, just so we know. And looking at all of you, I'm pretty sure you all already know that it's too much gray hair here. I know that you all know you've been practicing and surrendering and giving yourself to that which is larger than that small monkey mind that tries to resist all of this, But when I was 8 and had that meeting, one thing that happened, and Jim talks about this too, this inner knowing, I never, from then on, how do you do a double negative? I never didn't know.
That's it.
I knew how to meet God. And I knew, even though I couldn't have described it to you back then, I knew what would happen. There would be something that happened to me, not like getting God on my to-do list, try to champion God into my to-do list, what I wanted him to do for me. Somehow that was undone in that one very first meeting, because I wanted him to bring my mom back to me, and that was undone. And somehow it set up a spiritual knowing that that's not what's supposed to happen when I fall into a posture where I meet God. I get in on whatever it is that God is, breathing into me in that very moment and bringing me alive and everything else with it. So that's presence, and that's what was compelling. Another way you say, Jim, is once you do presence, you don't want to not do it. And so I never not want to do it. But the thing that I thought back then, Jim, is I just wanted to get a bunch of people, somehow doing it with me. And since then, I think that's been the longing, the deep longing, all my spiritual career of being in the ministry. It was trying to draw people into this loving reality, and it's not apparently obvious to everyone, because I've explained myself way too much, way too many words, and it has not always created that same thing in other people. And so I'm here. We said, starting this, that two or three is really a good number to start with presence. And what I like about that too is I am most present in front of another being, a human. Certainly, that's my easiest point of contact, but I've learned how to do that with the more than human world. And thank God for that. It's saving me daily. So, Brian, I don't know how much that got to where you wanted to go, but for me, that is presence, and that's the longing, and it's all tied together.
No, thank you, Jim.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you both. We do want to open this up to questions from the participants that are with us here this evening. Before we do that, if I may be so bold, I would just add my little bit of experience with choosing presence and the practice of presence. It was Jim Heaney and Jim Taylor came to me early on in the pandemic. It may have been like January, February of 2021, and they were looking for someone to help them put together a website for choosing presence. And the old expression, when the student is ready, the teacher will show up. I really did not expect this to kind of grab me, choosing presence and the practice of presence to grab me the way it did. My own experience is I had been, so if someone comes up to me and says, what is choosing presence? What is the practice of presence? And I said, well, very simply, it's a form of prayer and meditative practice, contemplative. It's a contemplative practice. But it's more than that, because I was introduced to meditation and contemplation through yoga. I have an older sister who years ago got certified as a yoga teacher, and she dragged me to a couple classes, and then I started to understand a little bit about meditation. She would urge students to do that. And of course, there's that shavasana at the end of class where you really have a meditative, quiet experience. And so for years and years, that was what meditation was to me, was that practice. But what I discovered with choosing presence and practice of presence is that meditation is so much more than sort of a routine that is for your health. It took meditation out of my head and it brought it into my heart. And that was an awakening for me to understand that meditation, prayer, contemplative practice is not a head exercise. It's not even a physical exercise. It's so much more of a heart-centered sort of exercise. And it's come at I mentioned the pandemic. I mean, so much that happens in our lives can benefit from stillness, from peace, from presence, from all the things that we talk about when we talk about practicing presence and choosing presence. So that's a little bit about my experience of this so far. And of course, it's an ongoing practice. It really is, because there's so many ups and downs in life. It's challenging at times, but at other times it's really the rock, and actually it's always really the rock and foundation to come back to, as long as I can find that. So again, to everybody that's here with us this evening, you're probably familiar with Zoom by now, but if not, there's a reactions that you can, there's something down in the bottom where you can send a reaction or raise your hand if you have a question. And I will be glad to call on you, and you can ask a question of Jim Heaney or Jim Taylor. Or, if you can't get my attention or whatever, you can just unmute yourself and go ahead and jump in with a question. We'll do the best we can with all of this. So yeah, and if you guys don't have questions to start out with, I can certainly seed us with a couple questions here, but let me take a pause and see if anybody has a question.
Yeah, Yeah, I just want to comment. I've been doing so, Brian. I took your first practicing presence workshop online a couple years ago,
Yeah.
and so it's the three breaths um, is, I think, been something I continue to do every day. So it's become a habit for me, and just my comment is that I don't I don't always want to do it. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't always want to be present because in my mind is like not always like a happy place. Okay. So I'm not always like just wanting to just be present because a lot of being present for me is, just being honest with what I'm feeling. And my go-to is like worry, right? Or I just, and so when I catch myself being present, I've had to really work hard because it's like something that's like, yeah, I have to be honest. It's like I don't like being with myself because, but the breathing helps. And then on the second breath, I get stuck in all these feelings. Wait, I'm feeling this way. No, I'm feeling that way. Wait, how am I feeling? And then I miss the third breath. When it's like, wait, Joe, you're moving on to the third breath. The third breath is where you really want to, let yourself experience some calm and in God's presence. And so anyway, I just wanted to share a little bit. I'm still working on it. It's still a habit for me. It's still something that I see as valuable, and I've made it part of my practice. And I want to thank you for that. All in.
Oh,
Oh,
thank you, Joe.
do you want us to comment on that, Brian, or how?
Yeah, if
I'm
you
not.
have some thoughts that you want to share with Joe.
We're so used to being in council, where we don't comment on something someone said.
Yeah.
Joe, I know you know that, but no, you said everything that's common unto all of us, Joe. I tease the guys when I'm out in the wild talking about presence. I get 8 good seconds when I'm doing my sit with them. And then my mind is off doing the taxes and, whatever else it's got lined up for me. It's astonishing. And what I've learned over the years is that is the practice. I'll tell you the best thing I ever heard that says what I'm trying to say. Thomas Keating was doing a centering prayer retreat, a silence retreat, and a woman came up to him and said, "Father Keating, I'm terrible at this whole thing." And he said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, the whole time I'm trying to move into silence, my mind must have wandered 1,000 times." And he said, "Oh, that is so terrific." And she said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "That was 1,000 times you came back to center." And that is the practice. Somehow, Jim Heaney, we've mistaken what we're doing this for, that we're trying to get good at being silent, and still. But what we're really becoming good at, I don't even know if that's the right language, but the practice is coming back to center, Joe. And I celebrate all of those times that you have to come back to center. Jim?
Very good.
Yeah, absolutely. Chapter 7 kind of speaks to some of what Joe was saying too. It's called the courage to stop negative thinking and gossip. And of course, when I first read that chapter title, even I kept thinking of the external voices and things like that, not all those internal negative voices and thoughts and gossiping that goes on that kind of sabotage us. Jim, where do you think? Where do all these Jim Heaney? Let me ask you, where do you think all these negative thoughts and this sort of internal dialogue, where does all that originate? What does that put? Where are those voices coming from?
See, when we talk about unconsciousness, unconsciousness is our thoughts, emotions, memories, desires, motivations that lie outside of our awareness, yet they have a profound effect on our daily life, because that is what triggers our inner negativity, our inner conflicts, our fears, our worries, our lack of self-esteem. And what happens in presence as we put our trust in God, like talking about things running through our mind when we're breathing, it's like this. When I first started practicing, I'm going back 20, 25 years, and I used to start taking 3 breaths, and it almost felt like I ain't got time to breathe because I think I'm going to miss something. Okay. And I was right. What I was going to miss is all the misery I caused myself while I'm in that unconscious state. The only way to overcome unconsciousness is by having a contrast. There has to be something better in order for us to change. And God's spiritual being is better, that clear before and after we're talking about. But we have to do it consistently enough in order to have confidence in it. And I hope all of us, which is very important, use the app, but also you have to read the book. The book gives us the context of what this all means. What does unconsciousness mean? Where does it start? How does it happen? Okay, like Carl Jung said, 95% of the people are unconscious 95% of the time. That's a little scary when you think about it. When are we living real life? Because only stillness allows real life to break through. And without stillness, and the practice of stillness, what's really going to happen? We're just going to sort of condemn ourselves to far too much unconsciousness in our daily lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. Again, I want to invite questions from anybody that wants to come in. If I can't see all of you on screen, I'm sorry. So it's kind of, I'm using the participants window to see if you raise your hand. But if I don't see you and you have a question, just please, jump in. We're happy to have your question.
And by the way, I might add, anyone never think a question is not important. Every question is important. And many times, the ones we think are not so important become the most important. And remember this, whatever state you're in, from a present standpoint, we've been there. And occasionally go back there.
This is why I like the workshop format that we often teach into, because it allows people to get together and counsel in small groups and things like that to really talk about their experiences of practicing presence and as we work through the chapters together. So that is key. I will say, Jim, you say in chapter 3, which is called Stillness, Accessing God's Spirit, that stillness is the gateway to spirit. And I was just going to ask you maybe to clarify a little bit of how are stillness and presence related?
Well, they're basically one and the same. Okay. Being present to God's presence is being still to God's presence. So it's the same. But the power of stillness is, and I might add this here too, when you're doing your practices, let's say you're having a hard time and too many thoughts pop in. Make that breath deeper. That has a definite effect on your level of stillness. Just make it deeper. And believe me, once you do it consistently over a month, 2 months, you will have no problems bringing in stillness. And also, it's never about being perfectly still, okay? But when you get to a level of stillness, thoughts may come, but they no longer can penetrate your presence. It's always about going deeper and increasing our capacity to experience God's spiritual being. And it has to humble us every day. as we practice and we every day presence, we realize, holy mackerel, I'm alive 30, 40, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. I never was able to experience this inner freedom as I experience when I become truly still with the right intention to connect with God's spiritual being. If it's not humbling us every day, we're obviously not breathing as we should or as often as we should.
Jim Taylor, one of the things that comes up repeatedly in with the practice of presence in our workshops are the morning practice and the hourly reminders. And I know that we've talked about this before, but I imagine some of the people on this call are maybe new to the practice of presence, or maybe are just learning about the app and the practice, and they're getting those hourly reminders, and they're going, "Oh, wait a second, what do I do here at this? This is not the time for me to practice presence." What can you say about the morning practice and the hourly reminders?
Well, the first thing I would say that Jim always says too is, you just keep practicing. Perfection is not the goal, peace is the goal. And those hourly reminders, so guys, just so you know, I really thought I was way more present than I was before the damn app showed up in my life. So the app is like the second Holy Spirit. I joke with it all the time. It's like, you again? And what I discovered about my own practice of presence along with the app, was that so much of the time I was choosing when I would be present. And I was doing a pretty good job, just so y'all know. Better than a lot of heathens around me. But the app would sort of knock on my door. I tease myself, it's like Jesus knocking on my door every stinking hour. Like, you again? I just had you in for coffee just a little while ago. Are you? And there was this love-hate relationship. I loved it the first 3 days. I thought it was fantastic, Jim. After 3 days, I was like, I'm starting to hate this thing. And I slowly had to stay in it, because I was in it with Jim Heaney. I couldn't hate the app, but I stayed with it, and I slowly discovered how the app could help me hold my intention. That's all it is. My intention is to be as awake as possible to Jim Taylor throughout the day. I'm not nearly as good at it as Jim Heaney, but I take these tools, and that's all they are, these practices, as invitations to help me in my journey. They're not the final word, though, Brian. If I don't answer that call at exactly 12 o'clock noon, I'm no longer concerned about that. My deeper concern is that I'm regularly throughout the day answering that call to consciousness, to be awake, to fall into a posture where I'm meeting God throughout the day. And listen, there's no real secrets here. You're falling into a posture where you're meeting God when you're letting go of the machinations of your small-minded self. It's never stops. I even after all these years, I don't have any greater success at stopping its incessant, trying to get my attention to things that don't really matter that much. They may matter. It's not like when you're driving down the road, you don't need to know that guy that just cut in front of you, because you need to slow down. You do need to sort of be there too. But the part of my critical mind that wants to judge him and belittle him and make myself the center of the universe because he cut in front of me, and all of that. That's the part that presence wants to somehow bring me alive in that moment. And in my best moments, I'm blessing that guy. on his way, you know, and I'm slowing down myself. Like, God, I'm going too fast. What's your hurry, Jim? I'll say. And it's another way of practicing stillness, Jim. So it's not necessarily tied to the hour, but the hour helps me all those other moments, you know, Brian. So now when it comes and I'm not exactly ready, I usually smile, and it's like an awareness that I have work to do, but it's not a shaming, it's not a guilt, it's not, you know, a deprivation. It's just an awareness that as human beings, we apparently are the only part of this planet that has the ability to deny itself. And when that reminder comes and I notice that I am not present and I'm not going to stop, because sometimes I'm just not going to stop, it brings that truth of how great my need is, I think, and my longing. It stirs my longing, but not in a negative way anymore, Jim. I hope that makes sense.
Oh,
It
yeah.
used to, there was a judgment with that. Oh, you're such a, what kind of Christian are you? You know, I don't do that anymore. I find the joy of it. It's like a, wow, there's more here. You know, there's more available all the time, this invitation to be present. So it's mostly a celebration. And I don't know if it's too soon to give grace, you know, because somehow the law is important to get us on the, you know, but then after a while you realize that can't save us. Grace has to have its way with us. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it helps me a lot.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it.
Perfect sense.
Brian McAlpin raised his hand to join the conversation. I want to invite him in.
I hope you're going to help me out, Brian.
Jim and Brian and guys and gals. Yeah, this is so helpful. That's so helpful. I think unknowingly, I have maybe broken all the rules. Yeah, like 20 or 25 years ago, I got to know the monks at Snowmass, Colorado, Father Thomas Keating and Theophane and whole group there. And then about 20 years ago, a good friend, my closest friend from school, invited me to Richard Rohr's men's retreat at Ghost Ranch, Abiquiu. And I think that was 2003. And such a powerful experience, right? So of that retreat. Remember, as a boy, you thought as a boy and as a man, as a man. So here, what I went and I've been getting the emails, and I know that practicing presence, centering prayer. I say to myself and my family, it's the most important thing I think I could do, the most helpful thing I could do. Here I went and invited my family, gals included, to this very Zoom. Who I won't name them, but you won't. But my mom and my sisters and a close family friend. So I think as guys, we don't get a lot of help a lot of times, or we don't have some of the rites of passage and helps. I mean, not that women have it all either, but it's so powerful to be in the men's work. And yet, what do I want to just say? Just we're going through an awful lot as a family, and overwhelming amount, and health crises, and that are extremely difficult. And I just continue to know, and let's all please pray for each other, that this practice, and I want to read the book and get the app. This practice, I think, is the most helpful thing that I think that many of us have come to experience that we could continue to do. I'm very grateful. Thanks. Guys and
Yeah.
gals.
Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you and Jim and I have been hopeful that this would be our breakthrough, Brian, because there's no male or female way to breathe, you know, and there's no Catholic or Buddhist or Christian way to breathe. So we think we're on good footing there, right, Jim?
Yes, absolutely.
I
Good
believe.
group.
Thank you, Jim. I believe Cecily has raised her hand. If I said that right, Cecily, want to begin?
Hello.
Cecile and
Cecile, I'm sorry.
Cecile.
her daughter, and we're two of Brian's invitees. And they've known about centering prayer for a long time, and I've read Brother Lawrence's book, but I'm really not versed in centering prayer. And so we came I'm not really sure as a newbie, like where do we start? I mean, other than reading the book, we don't have it yet because we just got the invite today, but is that where you would recommend starting for a newbie like me?
Yes, absolutely. Reading the book, you can get the app immediately because the app is free in the App Store. And what we've been working on, me, Jim, and Brian, is making the actual practice as simplified as possible. And anyone who does the morning practice, which guides us through, does the hourly reminder, okay, reads the book chapter by chapter, and there's no way, if they're doing that all the things we're mentioning now, they are going to experience. And let me tell you why I have that confidence. Because as I said earlier, we are not doing it. If our true intention is to connect with God's spiritual being, becoming aware of God's spiritual being, God is the one doing the changing. Our only commitment is to bring in stillness. As God says, I will fight for you. All you need to do is be still. And it's so true.
Thank you, Jim. Jim Taylor, do you want to add anything?
I just want to agree with Jim. You know, so I found this, Cecile, as an 8-year-old. Nobody taught me. The only thing I had going for me was I was just at bottom. The 12-steppers call it bottom. I had nowhere to go. My family was, unavailable to me. I had no adult figure. And, I cried out to God, and holy mackerel, I found exactly what we're talking about. And the odd thing was, I never from then on didn't know how to do it. I didn't know that you had to know how to do it because I had already done it. You know what I mean? It was like, so I remember, in seminary and I have multiple degrees, by the way, and they're telling me all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I've been doing that since I was 8 years old. But hey, I'm not alone. Everything in all of creation knows how to be itself, to be present. Everything around us is mirroring it all the time. We're the only part that is disconnected. And, like Jim says, I love his confidence that you'll just read the book and it's all there. I shake my head. I have 30 years of being a pastor where I look at Jim and go, oh, you have much faith. It's the opposite. Oh, you have much faith. Because I've just seen people struggle with this over the years. And to be honest, I don't always understand what is your problem. I want to say to them, it's so damn easy. Like Jim is saying, just read the damn book. It's easy. It's just be still. And the people are like, well, how do you be still? And he's like, just try it, and keep doing it. I think so. If I had to word it, down to a phrase, which I agree with you. Read Jim's book. It's so succinct. It is the shortest damn book. I can't even imagine saying my name in that space, much less explaining to you guys presence. And yet he did it. He really did. If I had to distill it, it would be longing. Cecile, if you have a longing to be present and to be in a posture where you're meeting God throughout the day, I think that's really all that's necessary. Everything flows from that. I don't think God meant it to be hard. We make it hard. This part of our brain, Jim calls it when you're not, Jim, how do you say it? Thinking and breathing?
Well, when you're breathing and thinking at the same time.
And you're not in presence at that point. You're just
Exactly.
thinking and breathing.
You're out of
Yeah.
You're out of reality.
So there's this part of us that wants to control every damn thing, including us and including how we connect with God. And it is not our best teacher. It is not our best advisor. So it's very likely that up here in this frame, we are not going to find it. I just don't know if there's much success there. And if you read the book and it's all here, hey, look at that. I don't know why it did that, but if it's all here, it's not going to do us much good. Jim, do you know you know that they can read the book and memorize it and still miss it?
Oh,
Can
well,
you speak to that for a second? Because you're so much clearer than me.
That's so important, because without the practices, okay, read the book, yes, but you got the essential is the practices. The essential is doing that morning practice and that hourly reminder, and think about this. The alarm goes off and it's 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay. Now you just stop for approximately 40 seconds. That's what it takes. And you just stop and take 3 deep breaths, slowly let the air out. I guarantee you, if you do it the way we ask you to do it, I find it very difficult to think it's not going to have an inner response to you. Now, if we're just breathing biologically, all right, 10 o'clock, I'm breathing. Now you're going to get there. It's got to be with intention. And once we realize, look, when I started this 25 years ago, started practicing meditation, presence, it took me, even though it was happening to me, after the first few years, it wasn't happening. It actually started happening after a conversation with Richard Rohr. And we were talking about presence. And I said, Richard, what exactly do you mean by presence? Because I'm practicing presence, but when you talk about it, it doesn't sound like what I'm doing. And he said to me, Jim, presence is everything. It was like a light bulb went on all of a sudden. You know why? Because I never really was becoming still. But as you become still and you realize the power is not coming from you, the power is coming from God's spiritual being. Like another question we might ask ourselves when we practice presence is, how do I know I'm connecting with God's spirit? Well, that was my question too, 22, 24 years ago. And then I realized, wait a second, can I create this? Can I control this? No, I can only be present to this. So that is, God's being is always there. Peace is always in the present moment. My problem at the time, and most of our problems are, God is always in the present moment, and we are rarely in the present moment.
Right.
But as we do it consistently, don't forget, God becomes the teacher. He is not going to fail. If we bring in stillness with the right intention, and all of us are capable of doing that. The rest is done to us.
Thank you, Jim. I want to.
I'm just, if you don't mind, Brian, I just want to think of an analogy because Jim, I'm listening to all of that, and I'm thinking like if somebody, you know, let's just pretend they didn't know what wet was, and we're describing water and wetness, and they say, "I want to be wet. I'm tired of being dry. How do I get wet?" You know, you got to give yourself to the water. You can't think yourself wet. You can't just imagine wetness and be
Right.
wet. You got to go get in somehow. And I think that's the real trick. People just because of the way our brain is, it's always interrupting the natural rhythm. And there's mythology around this, the great fall, the fall where we became separated from God. This mythology that describes this distance between why can't we just experience this fullness? And we've had all these descriptions throughout history, and all the wisdom traditions have some version of this where we're separated from what was natural. It was natural for us to know how to be present. And this part of us, I think it's all in blame. It's all right in here. It's not the body. We always thought the body was evil. And I don't know that any part of us is evil, but this brain, it gets in the way. There's a Chinese poet, I quote, he's Chinese, Wu Wei Wu is his name. What a great name, right? Wu Wei Wu. He said, why are you so unhappy? Why are you so unhappy? And he's a poet, so it's great because we don't have to answer it. We can wait for him to tell us why. Okay, tell me. I know. Why are you so unhappy? Because 99.9% of all that you do and all that you say is for yourself. And there isn't one. Why are you so unhappy? Because 99.9% of all that you say and all that you do is for yourself. And there isn't one. He's, I believe, giving this, awareness, this part of us. It was capturing all of our attention all the time and demanding so much from us. And yet, really, at the end of the day, gives us so little back. And presence is that space between what we imagine, all that we do, and all that we long to be. Presence is somehow in between that, and we fall into a posture where we can be present, and we experience it. So the wetness, you got to get in somehow. And you, my friends, hopefully, if you know this already yourself, but if you don't know, great people like Mother Teresa, she said one time in her confession, she said she only experienced it one time in her whole life. I don't understand that. Not on a personal level. Intellectually, I understand it because I meet people all the time at church who clearly they're not they're not wet. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but God bless you. In your desperation, cultivate the longing. And then, like Jim says, just keep doing the practice. And I agree, Jim. I don't have any idea why they wouldn't experience the same thing that you and I experience in that moment. I don't know why, but I do know, just so you know, that it is very difficult for most people, apparently. So if you are there and you're lonely and you're listening to all this, and you're going, damn it, how come I'm the only one? You're not. You're not alone in your desperation. But I can promise you it is real. There is realness. There is reality. There is presence. There is God. There is something deep speaking to deep. And you, my beloved, belong in it as much as any of us. So don't despair.
Jim, if you don't mind, may I speak to that experience? I
Please,
had
Barry.
the experience that was just expressed, and in your response to that was so close to me. I mean, it's like you're reading my mail. That's my experience. It was years ago when I was experiencing this at depth and trying so hard to get over the hump or understand it or whatever, that I finally I was with James Finley. I'm in Sacramento, California, and Finley would come up here from Southern California, where I live. I live in Northern California, once a year to do retreats, and he and I were talking at a break, and I was describing to him this challenge, the harder I try, the more elusive it becomes. That's the point.
Mm-hmm.
The harder I try, the more elusive. And I'll never forget what he said. In fact, I said, I've got to write this down. This has been years ago. And he said to me, to freely choose, as I'm yearning for this disposition, this place, this setting, to freely choose an inner posture that offers the least resistance to being overtaken by what I long for, but am powerless to achieve on my own. Oh my goodness. I didn't understand most of what he said that day, but I wrote it down and I kept coming back to it over the years, and I still come back to it. Well, I mean, not to say it, but when I find myself trying to achieve it or accomplish something or get somewhere, he said, it's like trying the way you're doing it, Barry. He said, it's the way I did it too. It's like trying to pick up a board that you're standing on. It does not work. You can't get there from here. And I thought, well, and so the last, I don't know, the last few years has been, among other things, an exercise in reminding myself to freely choose that inner posture that offers the least resistance to being overtaken by what I long for, what I yearn for, but I'm powerless to achieve on my own.
And I would just say that's exactly what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's not what we do, it's what is being done to us. We cannot burden ourselves by thinking we're going to change ourselves. Only God can change us. But we have to be patient enough, and we have to be consistent enough and bring in stillness with the intention that allows us to put our trust in God, put our trust in His spiritual being. It's hard for us to let go, but we'll only let go consistently when we found something with more love, with more connectedness, and that humbles us. And that's through stillness with intention. And what Jim said is dead on, and it's the same thing. If you read the book, we probably have at least 20 uh, spiritual teacher quotes, but everyone's saying the same thing, just different words. But at the center of everything is surrender. I cannot change myself without connecting with God's spiritual energy. And to connect with God's spiritual energy, it has to be true stillness, and it has to be with intention. And the knowing is not a mental knowing, it's an intimate knowing, like a man knows his wife.
Jim, it's like to just keep piggybacking on my analogy. Now I might have to think about this more, but you can't create wetness. The wetness exists on its own, but you can give yourself to it.
Yep. Right.
And that's what Jim Finley was saying there. You know, we're resistant to it because, Barry, it's so perfect because we want to own this whole thing. We want to create it. This part of us wants to be able to somehow put God in our back pocket and talk about it a lot to people, you know, how we got it right. But it just doesn't work like that. But the beauty is we can give ourselves to it. And then when we do, we're part of it. We're as much a part of it as it is a part of itself, which is the astonishing thing. But that can't happen without giving ourselves to it. And this is the great difficulty for most people because they want to try to figure it out and think our way into it. Richard said this to me one time. He said, I don't even know if I believe in contemplation anymore. I don't know if I should tell this out loud because he's like, it doesn't work. These people, they do it, but they're not doing it. And he said, I just don't know if you can, you know, practice your way into it. He was saying the same thing, the consternation I have at this stage in my life. It's like, I think I could just explain it to people and they'll know how to do it. And it just has not been my experience. It's the work. It is truly the work, the deep work, and it is spiritual work, my friends. And I'm still doing it, just so you know. Jim Heaney is still doing it. We do it every day, all day, out of sheer desperation. And look at this. Brian Mueller, why is there what? I don't know why that just happened. Does everybody see that or just me? It came out of the corner of my eye.
I got it.
I'm like, what the hell is going on that side of the screen? And it's my head with, you know, fireworks. But the longing secures the possibility. So if you're here, and to Brian McAlpine's point, you know, the longing draws you in, and then we got the experience of Barry. What a lovely testimony of staying at it.
Yeah.
And then when you were ready, the teachers came, you know, Jim Finley, another Jim, by the way. I think it's no secret we're gradually taking over the world, Jim. You notice all these Jims. But he spoke into that loneliness and that longing, and you were ripe and ready. And Richard spoke into Jim Heaney's longing and loneliness. Presence is everything. And for him, that was the hook that took him in. And, you know, yours, if you haven't already experienced it, yours is ahead of you. It's waiting for you. Don't despair, you know. And if you've already experienced it, then I would say celebrate it. So any practice that brings you alive, any practice that enlarges your heart and with compassion for the world and for yourself, that you have it. That is presence. That's the result of presence. You want to know what presence does? It enlarges your heart. It brings you into the reality of the world, which is compassionate and loving, forgiving. It is full of, and so surrender for me, Jim, when you say to take the breaths, you know, this is exactly what I'm surrendering in that second that I start to take. And I already know, okay, if I'm going to do presence, I got to let go of the things that I'm rehearsing, whatever it is. My concerns, my fears, my anxieties, the people that I'm upset with in the moment. I got to forgive them. And there's a part of me that would like to hang on to all that, but there's another part that already knows, that is a lose-lose, Jim, if you choose that. And I start smiling just like I'm doing right now. And my face is hot. I don't know if you can tell I'm blushing because this is a vulnerability where I gotta let go, just like everybody else. And I do. And then the wonder of wonders happens every time. It's always the same. I always think, well, why did I resist that? Peace and joy, a joy that's not happy, but this deep okayness comes. Why would I resist that? I don't have the faintest idea, but I do regularly. But the good news is I regularly let go of it. Right, Jim?
Yep, you
That's
got
breathing. That's present.
it.
Thank you both so much. We're a little past the hour, so maybe.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, it's
That
fine.
was way too fast.
It was fast. And we didn't get to everybody's question. Some people that had questions actually dropped off the call. I'll reach out to them a little bit later if I see.
That Jim Taylor was talking way too much.
Oh no, it was wonderful.
No, absolutely.
And as you guys were talking, some of the questions and things that came up, one of the things that came to mind was Jim Heaney and I learned earlier this year of a woman who's a spiritual director that got a copy of Choosing Presence and she really liked it. And she started offering it to her directees and even had a little workshop of her directees together to go through the book Choosing Presence together. And her name is Lisa Heckerman. Jim and I actually recorded a video with her in January. And I think some of the things that she has to say about the practice of presence could be beneficial too. Her video, it's about an hour-long conversation. It's on our YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com/choosingpresence, you'll find it. It's wonderful. And she and again, we're noticing too that Jim Heaney, Jim Taylor, and I, we know each other from the Illumin work, the men's work, but of course we're also part of other communities. And so we found it easy to reach out to the men in our community, but we really want to bring this work to other communities as well. And that includes, pastors and spiritual directors and just people that are doing work in their communities, have small groups and things like that. So yeah, this is not just a practice for men, although it's certainly beneficial for men, but it's for everyone. So Jim Heaney, Jim Taylor, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we close up this evening?
Yeah, my hope over Jim's hope too, is we would definitely like to tap into more women practicing presence. It's my experience is when I've done classes with women, not that I haven't done nearly as many as with women as men, but they're very rich classes. Women tend to get it. I feel probably a little bit better than men. And I think they'd stay at it a lot more consistently than men. So they'd be working with their husbands to keep on it.
Thank you, Jim.
Very true.
Taylor, anything else to add?
Well, it's a delight. I really just feel the deep presence when I look in all your faces. And it's a joy for me and an honor to be here. I'm sure there are many of you that have wonderful things you could have added had you gotten the opportunity. And I hope we get another chance with you.
Absolutely.
And if you have anything you'd like to help us with, or if you have questions that remain that we didn't get to, feel free to reach out to any one of us, Brian, Jim, or myself, and we'd be happy to stir the pot with you and we're just grateful to see you wouldn't be here if you didn't have some of this already at work in you. And so it gives me a lot of it affirms me to keep going, because Jim, we're not the only ones. Daryl, you want to say something?
How do we contact you guys?
Yeah, thanks for asking,
Is
Daryl.
there something?
Yeah, there is. Now, we have a website, and obviously we have a contact page on that. You can also use the emails, either feedback@choosingpresence.org, or you can just email me directly, brian@choosingpresence.org, and I'll make sure your email gets to the right person. We have those links in our weekly newsletter as well, to reach out to us. And I try to be pretty responsive. Give me 24 hours or so, but we'll get back to you and respond as best we can. And again, I will publish tomorrow on our website. We have a news page, which is kind of a blog. I'll publish the notes from our gathering this evening. I'll even include a link to Father Richard's podcast, in which I took the meditation from, and some other helpful links and notes. And we'll post a video recording of this evening online. So there'll be some more resources. And again, like Jim Taylor said, we'd like to do this again, and we will do this again. This year, we're going to be Choosing Presence is going to be at the Wild Goose Festival in Union Grove, North Carolina, which is a wonderful outdoor festival. I think it was started by Jim Wallace of Sojourners originally, but it's grown into a large festival there of people, and we'll be representing Choosing Presence there. So, and there'll be a lot of ways to connect with us. So, thank you very much to everyone who joined us this evening. We're delighted to have you with us and look forward to seeing you back at future events. We hope you're paying attention to our weekly messages. You can get those on our website at choosingpresence.org/subscribe if you don't already get those. And Jim Heaney, do you have something you'd like to add?
No, first of all, this was excellent, and hopefully we'll do it soon, and get to the point where you can do it even once every month. I would like that very much.
Absolutely. And so we'd just like to say, finally, on behalf of Jim and Jim, I'd say good evening and have a blessed Easter. Thank you so much, everyone.
Happy Easter.
Peace,
Holy
brothers.
Easter.
Peace.
Bless you guys.
Take care.
Peace.
And gals.